What is up? It is Thursday evening, the start of NFL Week 6. We have Giants-Patriots playing tonight and a great set of games lined up for this weekend. But if you're a fantasy football player, as we do every week, we'll be looking at the top 5 positional matchups for this week's set of games. Everything is updated. We've taken into account what happened last week, updated the numbers, done the research, and everything in this video is here to show you which defenses are giving up the most points split out by position. So if you're looking for top 5 positional matchups going into Week 6 NFL, stay tuned. Welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports, and thank you as always for tuning into the channel. Whether you're new here, a returning subscriber, or just somebody that happened to stumble across the channel, I thank you again for finding this video, this channel, and listening in. And if you are new here or haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button below. That really does help support the channel. And also like this video and leave me a comment below with anything fantasy football week 6 related. These matchup videos that get released each week are meant to be helpful whether you're playing season long or DFS. Although this shouldn't be the only research and the only data and information you use for fantasy football, matchups are always a great starting point each and every week. They help you determine if you're playing season long which of your players are in the best spots, and if you're playing DFS, which players you might want to start and which games you might want to start looking at when setting lineups. Prior to this week, we did use a combination of 2018 data in addition to what we had so far this season. But I do believe now we're at a point going into week 6 where we can just focus on 2019 data only. And before we move on, I mention it each week, I usually pull this data from a tool on RotoGrinders. I will link it below in the description. But RotoGrinders does have a great tool. It's really easy to use, whether you're playing season-long, FanDuel, DraftKings, Yahoo DFS, it doesn't matter. It applies to all of that, half-point or full-point PPR. You can really quickly determine which defenses are essentially giving up the most yards, the most fantasy points to each position. And finally, I do need to mention, even though I already did, because of several questions I've received in the past, that this isn't the only piece of research. I don't base my lineups only on matchups, and neither should you. But matchup data and matchups in general are important, and it's an easy way to start your week off in fantasy football, simply because it does help you determine which players are in the best spots and facing the weakest defenses at their respective position. All that being said, something I started last week is kind of a recap and some notes from the prior week's action. So looking back to week 5, there's a couple things I did pull out here. The first and probably the most shocking thing here is Chicago's defense. They allowed 169, nearly 170 rushing yards to Oakland last week, although the game was in London, so it could be a bit of an anomaly, especially against the run. So it is a bit unusual to see that. Cincinnati, they just continue to give up massive amounts of yards on the ground, allowing another 266 rushing yards last week to Arizona. Although the one thing to pull out of this is that 93 of those yards were to the quarterback, to Murray. But still, Johnson and even their backup running back had a great day on the ground if you're looking at yards per carry. Tampa Bay, they started the season decently strong on defense. In fact, a number of people were discussing them as having an improved, pretty good defense. But again, that's why we use the combination early on of 2018 and 2019 data, because it was a little bit of a mistake. They played San Francisco, they played Carolina, Cam Newton. So if we look back to week 5, they gave up 345 yards through the air, and they're now on their 4th straight game of giving up 300 and plus yards passing to the quarterback position. Really, just Tampa Bay is becoming the defense as we expected. Atlanta, a team that just hasn't been known for a defense over the last couple of years, just continues to get scorched through the air. Deshaun Watson and Houston just absolutely put up big numbers against them last week. Atlanta allowed 400 plus yards to Deshaun Watson, gave up 5 TDs through the air, and now they've given up over the past 3 weeks 10 total touchdowns through the air. So again, a defense you can really look to attack via quarterbacks or wide receivers or even tight ends. And finally, to kind of shift gears here a little bit, we always talk about defenses we want to attack, but it's also good to understand which defenses are improving. Pittsburgh's defense over the last couple of years hasn't been very good, but over the last couple of weeks, it has shown some improvements. They shut down a pretty high-powered, potent offense in Baltimore. The thing here is they've actually, over the last couple of weeks, looked good ever since they made a trade with Miami and acquired Mika Fitzpatrick. So they're much better on defense. They have a number of turnovers. I think they're tied for number one with the Patriots this year with 12 total turnovers. If you put that into comparison of last year, they only had 15 on the year, and they already have 12 through 5 weeks. So Pittsburgh's defense is improving, a team you might not want to look to attack. They're losing games. They're not great as a team overall, mostly because their offense is just decimated with injuries, but their defense still remains solid. But moving on to the more important thing here, the top 5 positional matchups. For quarterback position, the top 5 teams giving up the most, the top 5 defenses giving up the most points to the quarterback position includes Miami, Atlanta, Arizona, New Orleans, and Washington. So some of these are starting to change since we're now focusing just on 2019 data. But again, if you look here, Miami giving up the most, nearly 28 points on both DraftKings and FanDuel. They face off against Case Keenum this week. Atlanta, we've talked about them already a little bit, just getting torched through the air last week. They're giving up nearly 25 points on DraftKings, 24 points on FanDuel. A good matchup for Murray this week in Arizona. On the other side of the ball there, Arizona is a team that's also giving up a ton of yards through the air, or a ton of points to quarterbacks. Looking at 24 points on DraftKings, 22 on FanDuel, so Matt Ryan in a great spot. New Orleans is a team known to give up a lot of points through the air. Again, a top 5 positional matchup for the quarterback position. DraftKings, 24 points, FanDuel, 22. Minshew, he actually had a really good week last week for Jacksonville, so a guy here in another great spot. And then Washington just struggling really all over the place on defense. Josh Rosen on the other side of the ball for Miami, looking like a great spot against Washington. Moving on to the running back position, top 5 defenses giving up the most points to running backs this season. Again, Miami tops the list here. We got Miami, Cincinnati, Green Bay, Detroit, and Denver. Some surprising teams, actually, at least for me this week. Miami's just giving up a ridiculous amount of points. You're looking at 40 on DraftKings and nearly 36 on FanDuel. Adrian Peterson, I guess, would be the back you want to focus on in Washington. Cincinnati, I've had them every week as a target. They're just giving up so many points to running backs. DraftKings nearly 40, FanDuel 34 plus. Mark Ingram in a great spot. Green Bay a little bit surprising here, giving up 32 plus points on DraftKings, 28 plus on FanDuel each week. Kerryon Johnson for Detroit is in a great spot there. On the other side of the ball, you have Detroit, who actually gives up a ton of points to running back positions. Aaron Jones also in a great spot. But both those guys play each other on Monday night. So if you're playing DFS, not on the main slate, but keep that in mind for season long. In Denver here, another surprising team because they typically have a great defense, giving up a ton of points again to the running back position. They're number 5 on the list. Derrick Henry lines up in a great spot. Moving on to the wide receiver position, top 5 teams, top 5 defenses giving up the most points to wide receivers this season. You're looking at Atlanta at number 1, followed by Tampa Bay, Washington, New York Giants, and Philadelphia. All receivers here for the teams playing these defenses in great spots. Atlanta giving up nearly 46 on DraftKings, 38 plus on FanDuel. I mentioned them earlier for Murray. Will Fitzpatrick, if Christian Kirk plays, and then obviously Johnson, their third wide receiver here, all in great spots again this week versus Atlanta. You're looking at the Atlanta-Arizona game as potentially a great game all around for passing and receiving. Tampa Bay, a team giving up 45 plus 38 on FanDuel to the wide receiver position, but they play Carolina in a really early game in London on Sunday, so they're not included in most DFS slates, but for season long, Moore, Samuel, Wright, all in great spots. Talked a little bit already about Washington and how bad their defense has been, giving up a ton of points, both DraftKings and FanDuel to wide receivers, but they're playing Miami, so not the most elite set of wide receivers. Actually, outside of Parker, I really didn't even know who was on that team in terms of wide receivers, but that's what you're dealing with. The New York Giants playing tonight against the Patriots, giving up again 44 plus on DraftKings, 37 plus on FanDuel, a ton of points to the wide receiver position. All go for any wide receiver for the Patriots, whether that's Edelman, Gordon. I think Dorsett's out tonight already, so you might want to consider someone like White, who is a pass-catching back. Finally here, the number 5 team in terms of defenses giving up points to the wide receiver position is the Philadelphia Eagles. Really a good defense typically each year, including this year. I think they're really good against the run. If you play them as a defense last week whether it's DFS or season long, they scored a ton of points, scoring 2 touchdowns as a defensive unit. But again, their cornerbacks are really, really bad, especially against number one, or I guess I should say outside receivers. DraftKings 43 plus, FanDuel 36 plus in terms of points given up to wide receivers. So that's showing how weak their cornerbacks have been this season, last season, just really for the last couple of years. But they play the Vikings this week, so you're looking at Thielen, Diggs, and even Johnson in a great spot. And finally here, the tight end position, top 5 defenses giving up the most points to tight ends. We talked about it almost every week this season. The number one team that you can target a tight end against is Arizona. They're giving up so many points to the tight end position. Up until last week, they had given up a touchdown every single week, including a multi-touchdown tight end week. But Arizona's given up 24 plus on DraftKings, 20 plus on FanDuel. Hooper, playing for Atlanta, is in a great spot. Tampa Bay also is number 2 on this list, giving up 20 plus on DraftKings, 16 plus on FanDuel. So Greg Olsen, if you're playing season long and you have him, or you're maybe playing somehow that early slate, you could get him in. Indianapolis is on this list. They are typically, but they're on a bye this week, so we can ignore them. Seattle was a little bit surprising here, giving up a lot of points, both DraftKings, FanDuel, half point or full point PPR. The only issue here is that they're playing Cleveland, who lost Njoku, so not necessarily a tight end you would have in Harris in season long, and might not be a guy you would target in DFS. And Miami's on every list so far, but you're looking at DraftKings 15 plus, FanDuel 12 plus, playing Washington this week. So Vernon Davis for DFS, I don't think you'd play him in season long, but he lines up as a top 5 matchup for the tight end position this week. And so that wraps up our NFL Week 6 top 5 defensive matchup video. I hope you guys do find this useful. Again, this should only be a starting point. You shouldn't just rely on matchup data alone, but it does help paint the picture early on as to which players are in good spots going into the week. Again, we're only focusing on top 5. There's a number of other matchups and players that are in great spots, so do your own research here, but I hope that this is beneficial and helps you get started on the week. As always, I've included a little bit of a cheat sheet here. Anyone that's crossed off is either on a primetime slate for DFS, so you might not be looking at them, or plays in that like random early London game. And as always, thank you again for tuning in. The community, the viewership, the channel continues to grow. It's been great. The matchup videos each week tend to be the most viewed videos, which is good to see. So I hope that this video is useful as you set your lineups both in season long and DFS. If you haven't done so already, please smash that like button below, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on matchups this week. If there's anything I may have missed, or in general just what you're thinking in terms of Week 6 fantasy football. Thank you all again for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video.